getting pregnant, being pregnant, having a baby, postpartum, and then like post-postpartum, once postpartum, always postpartum, am I right? Spiritual awakening, identity crisis, aka an ego death, and this dark night of the soul. I started making these videos because I was not seeing anywhere in my algorithms and circles, being a mom, this whole journey of matrescence and the 3D, those are very, very dense physical experiences. What I would pull from matrescence, that whole journey, matrescence, like adolescence, but now you're becoming a mom. If you haven't heard of that term, look it up because it's pretty life-changing. This journey of matrescence, like you can pull little bits and pieces of spirituality in there. But I'm still not seeing many people talking about different level of your spiritual awakening or your spiritual journey. That would include an absolute ego death. Many women can identify with an identity crisis after becoming a mom, being a new mom, and then having another child. Like every time you're having identity crisis, aka an ego death. Ego is in who you identify with, what you are is no longer, and this dark night of the soul. And by dark night of the soul, I don't mean postpartum depression. I did not have postpartum depression, but I was definitely in the experience of a dark night of the soul. Luckily, it wasn't nearly as long as what I've experienced before, but that's how I was able to recognize these things because nothing about it was clinical. Everything about it was spiritual. And I didn't hear anyone talking about that. All these experiences are truly like, sometimes they really suck, right? But like, it is truly an adventure for me, and being able to translate that for others. I'm a highly sensitive person and I can just like for you, here you go. What is this that we are involved in? All that to say, I don't know if we're supposed to be awake the whole time. I don't know. What do you think? Have you ever noticed that there are these moments where everything suddenly feels very clear? Not perfect, not solved, just more clear. For a moment, the noise, it quiets down. You remember what's important. You remember what matters. And that really becomes pretty clear after you have children, I would argue, or it did for me. But what didn't come so quickly to me is remembering who you are amidst all the chaos of the matrescence journey. But there are those moments where it does clear up and you are able to remember who you are beneath all that mess, all the roles and all the responsibilities and expectations. And then somehow it just slips away. A few hours later, maybe a few days later, maybe by lunchtime, life gets loud again. The calendar fills up, the dishes pile up, someone needs something. The world starts pulling at your attention from 100 different directions. And suddenly you're back inside the storm. I've been wondering about that lately. And not because I have an answer, but because I notice a pattern. And these videos are not lessons. They're investigations. So stay with me here for a second because I think that there's something here. I wonder that many of us secretly believe that once we have an awakening, a realization, a breakthrough, we're supposed to stay there. Guilty. That once we finally understand something, we shouldn't have to learn it again. Once we find peace, we should stay peaceful. Wouldn't that be great? I think that's kind of the expectation we set sometimes, even if logically we know that's like not really realistic. Once we trust, we should stay trusting. Once we remember, we should never forget. But what if that is not actually how being human works, and definitely not being a mother? But specifically, what if forgetting isn't evidence that we're failing? What actually if forgetting is part of the process? Because lately I've noticed something strange. The most meaningful realizations in life rarely come as information. They arrive, or so I've been noticing lately, they arrive as remembering. A sentence lands differently. A conversation reaches at the exact right moment. A walk in nature reveals something suddenly that we already know. A video appears on our feed. A line in a book catches your breath. And our first reaction usually isn't, I just learned something. I learned something there. It's, oh, I remember. And it's not usually conscious, but like the feeling is a remembering. And I just wonder if one of the most discouraging beliefs that we have is that growth should look like a straight line. That once we learn something, we should have it learned. Once we have healed something, we have healed it. Once we remember, we should never forget. Again, but life doesn't seem to work that way, does it? At least not from what I've observed, especially lately. Life seems to move more like a spiral when we circle back to the same lessons, the same fears, the same questions, the same truths. And it's almost like when we circle back, there's a different level of consciousness or a different viewpoint of it, a different lesson to be learned from that perspective. Because at first glance, it can look and feel like we're back where we started. But are we? Or are we meeting the same lesson from a different place within ourselves? Because the version of you returning today is not the same version of you who stood here a year ago or even a month ago. Maybe what feels like regression is actually refinement. Maybe what feels like forgetting is part of remembering, but at a deeper level. Maybe we aren't moving in circles, but we're moving in spirals. Hurricane. Maybe the deepest truths don't arrive as learning. Maybe they arrive as remembering. And that is fascinating to me, because if remembering is the experience, then forgetting must be part of the cycle. Otherwise, there would be nothing to remember. I think motherhood has made this impossible for me to ignore. And maybe you've noticed this too. There are seasons where you feel deeply connected, present, grounded, patient. You remember what matters. And don't forget that women physiologically experience all 4 seasons in one single month, which makes you wonder what we're experiencing in a whole day or even a whole hour. Anyway, but you remember the kind of mother that you want to be, the kind of person you want to be. And then someone spills something, someone cries, the schedule changes, the appointment gets moved, the plans just completely fall apart. You get 3 hours of sleep. Life happens. And suddenly you're reacting instead of responding, surviving instead of living. For a long time, I thought that this meant that something had gone wrong, that I had somehow lost the thing that I'd found. But lately I'm wondering, what if nothing has gone wrong at all? What if life isn't asking us to stay awake forever? What if life is teaching us how to return? Because when I look back at the moments that changed me, they were not permanent. They were moments. A realization, a conversation, a sunset, a walk, a prayer, an oracle reading, a quiet knowing. The moment itself passed, but it left a trail, a lantern lit, something I could return to. And maybe that's why certain books stay on our shelves, why certain songs move us decades later. Am I right, millennials? Why we save videos that we know we're going to watch again someday down the road. Not because we need new information, because we need a place to return to. I wonder if that's what we're all searching for. Not answers, but anchors, lighthouses, lanterns, something that helps us find the eye again when the storm gets loud. Because here's another thing I've noticed. The people who seem the most grounded aren't necessarily the people who never get overwhelmed. They aren't the people who never doubt themselves. They aren't the people who never lose their way. They just seem to know how to come back again and again. The strongest people are not the ones who never lose their way. They are the ones who know how to return. And that word has been following me around lately. Return. Not improve, not optimize, not transform. Return. Because transformation implies becoming someone else. Return implies coming back to you, home, to someone you've always been. And I don't know about you, but that feels different. And that resonates with me. Gentler somehow. Less exhausting, actually. What if the version of you that you're searching for isn't in the future? What if she's already right here? Beneath the noise, beneath the rushing, beneath the expectations, waiting patiently to be remembered. There's a phrase that stayed with me for a long time. Find the eye. At first I thought that it meant finding a place where the storm couldn't reach me. A quiet center somewhere beyond all the chaos. But lately I've been wondering if I misunderstood it. Maybe the eye isn't somewhere else. Maybe the eye is actually who we are beneath the weather. And if that's true, then every act of remembering becomes an act of returning. Not returning to a place, returning to ourselves. Maybe the eye of the storm isn't somewhere else. Maybe the eye is who you are beneath all the weather, all the chaos. Now, here's where things get really interesting, because for a long time I thought that awareness and knowledge and education was the destination. Notice the pattern, become conscious, recognize the treasure, wake up. And those things matter. It's like the first step. But awareness alone doesn't change much. We've all had moments where we knew exactly what was going on and still found ourselves caught inside. So maybe awareness is not the destination. Maybe awareness is the doorway. First we forget, then we remember, then we return. And maybe, eventually, we embody. Not as an achievement, not as like a finish line, as a way of being. Because there's a difference in thinking about peace and being peaceful, thinking about trust and trusting, thinking about presence and being present, thinking about the I and finding the I, and being the I, becoming the I, in the chaotic storm all around you. I don't know if that's where we're headed, but I think that there's something there. I think we're investigating something really important, something many of us have definitely felt but just struggled to name. Maybe this whole journey isn't about becoming someone new. Maybe it's about remembering, returning often enough that eventually we begin living from what we've remembered. Remember, return, repeat until it becomes who you are. So if you've been feeling discouraged lately, if you've forgotten something important, if you have lost touch with that feeling of clarity, maybe nothing has gone wrong. Maybe you're standing exactly where you're supposed to be. Maybe this is simply another invitation to return to the truth beneath the noise, to the stillness beneath the chaos, to the I beneath the storm. Because the better it gets, the better it gets. Remember, find the I, maybe embody the I, maybe be the I. If this conversation resonated with you, then you might enjoy the video where we explored what happens when you start to feel safe again after living in survival mode for so long. Because I think that these investigations kind of belong together. They're all part of the same trail. The great sacred return to yourself. Until next time, leave this lantern here for yourself. You may need it again. I know I will. This has been another echo from the eye of the storm within. See you for the next one.